Have you ever heard about Batman Legacy? I wouldn't blame you if you haven't. As I was researching for this video, I realized that none of the big comic book YouTube channels had ever made a video about it, even though it is a pretty important Batman story of the 90s. So I guess it's up to me to let you know just what is the problem with Batman Legacy.
I think it's good, except it sucks.
Legacy was published in 1996 as the sequel to Batman Contagion, the storyline where Gotham City goes through a pandemic. Since Batman is not a doctor of any kind, he couldn't do much of anything to help out. In the end, the cure to the virus was found by Azrael, of all people, and Gotham City was saved just in the nick of time. There was only one problem. The story never revealed who created the virus, and that's where Legacy comes into play. 3 months too late. The first big problem of Legacy is that it literally came too late. After Contagion was wrapped up, DC Comics waited 3 months before starting Legacy. 3 months where the many Batman titles published stories that were completely disconnected to the plotline of the deadly virus. That time is more than enough to make any storyline lose all of its momentum, and that's what happened to Legacy. By the end of those 3 months, DC Comics reintroduced the threat of the virus, and they started by killing the former mayor of Gotham, Armand Kroll, who was cured from the virus during Contagion. As it turns out, the cure was not effective, and all the people who were infected before now run the risk of developing a new strain of the virus that could kill them in hours. That is really bad news for Gotham, but especially for Robin, the only important character who was at risk of the new virus. Also, can we pause for a second to appreciate the composition of this panel, where the costume of the dead Robin is ominously looming behind the infected Robin, foreshadowing another possible death in the family. This is what good visual storytelling is all about, and it's thanks to the incredible Mike Wieringo in his final issue as the main Robin artist. The ending of Contagion was already rushed, but this sudden reappearance of the virus is even more. It comes out of nowhere and creates an extremely complicated problem in a very short time, where anybody who was exposed to the virus could develop the new strain at any point in their lives. This is very convenient for Robin, because while he is infected, he can still be a vigilante until the new virus kicks in, something that may never happen. So what all this means is that having Robin being a victim of the virus means absolutely nothing, because he never actually gets sick. So after learning about the death of the former mayor of Gotham, Batman starts interrogating Azrael to learn more about the origin of the virus and how the Order of Saint Dumas created it, hoping to find a way to stop it for good. Azrael tells Batman about an ancient war between the Order of Saint Dumas, the Vatican, and a mysterious player only known as the Immortal. He also tells Batman about a secret location in the middle of Africa where he could find more answers. Now let's see. How many Batman villains are usually working in Africa and are known as the Immortal? I wonder. The big mystery behind Legacy is to find out who created the Apocalypse virus, but right out of the gate, Azrael gives us enough information to figure it out. In fact, Azrael learned all this information in his own comic book when he was in Africa and he came across this guy and his daughter. So right from the start there was no real mystery, but DC pretended that it was and tried very hard to work for a big reveal. And so Batman gets ready to leave Gotham with Robin and Nightwing, and because he doesn't want to leave the city unprotected, God forbid, he leaves Huntress as the official vigilante. Now, I don't really think official vigilante is an actual job description, but at least this is a nice development in the Batman-Huntress relationship. This happened in Shadow of the Bat number 53, the first part in the prelude to Legacy, and the second and final part in the prelude takes place in Batman number 533, where Batman, Robin and Nightwing travel to Africa. They land in the desert, fight a large number of mercenaries, and find their way across ancient underground ruins before reaching their final destination. This prelude sets the stage for the big crossover, and right from the start it has a very different feeling from Contagion. Initially, things seem to be going in a very dark direction, with the virus coming back and becoming much deadlier than before. This dark and somber atmosphere is very quickly replaced with a more fantastic approach, where the very real danger of a highly contagious and lethal disease is replaced by a mystery that entails a thrilling adventure about ancient ruins in the middle of the desert in Africa. It's quite literally just like watching an Indiana Jones movie, but with Batman. Now, there are not many Batman stories that take place outside of Gotham, and very few of them happen in Africa, but almost all of them were written by the same person, the only writer who enjoyed taking Batman out of Gotham more than anyone else, and that is Dennis O'Neil, the writer who created this master villain and who was also the main Batman editor in the 90s. Something tells me that Legacy is an idea that came entirely from the mind of Denny O'Neil, and that becomes very evident in the first chapter of the storyline, published in Detective Comics issue 700. To celebrate this anniversary issue, DC Comics launched Batman Legacy, with Batman, Robin and Nightwing coming face to face with the only Batman enemy that could be interested in developing a virus that could decimate the entire world's population. I'm talking of course about Ra's al Ghul, the mysterious enemy behind the Apocalypse Plague, which was honestly the story's worst kept secret. Everyone could see Rage coming from a mile away, but regardless, DC really worked to make this anniversary special oversized comic to be such a big revelation that it almost convinces me that Legacy might actually be worthwhile. Almost. The art of Graham Nolan makes this issue look very sophisticated and dynamic, which is quite necessary to make up for a very questionable plot. As soon as Batman confronts Rage, the heroes uncover the Madman's plans of using the ancient knowledge of the Wheel of Plagues, buried beneath the ruins of an ancient temple in the middle of the desert, in order to achieve his ultimate goal of cleansing the earth from humans, in yet another one of his grand schemes to take over the world, which at this point had become extremely repetitive. Ra's al Ghul had become a villain with a one-track mind, and Legacy reinforced his characterization as a one-dimensional stereotype of an evil megalomaniac. Or simply put, Rage had become the Brain.
What are we gonna do tomorrow night?
Same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
The plot of Legacy, and especially in Detective Comics number 700, clearly draws inspiration from the episode Avatar of Batman the Animated Series, where Ra's al Ghul intends to take possession of the secret powers that are hidden in the underground ruins of an ancient temple in the middle of the desert. So Legacy was not quite original after all. In fact, Rage had already tried summoning a demon from hell to unleash a deadly plague in the Batman Adventures Annual number 2, and he already succeeded in spreading a deadly virus across the world in the Elseworlds story Batman, Brotherhood of the Bat. And all of this just to say that Legacy was not even that creative. So Batman, Robin and Nightwing have to overcome several obstacles to get to Rage, but by the time they catch up to him, it's already too late. The Madman is ready to escape, and he starts his getaway by drowning the place underwater to destroy the Wheel of Plagues and prevent Batman from learning its secrets to stop him. Of course, before getting away, Ra's al Ghul fights Batman with swords in the desert. Again. Really, it's like every single time Batman has to fight Rage, it must be done with swords, it has to be in the desert, and Batman has to do it shirtless. And at this point I'm starting to think that it's all part of his contract.
Very funny. A million laughs.
Nevertheless, the fight is very short, and the villains escape, but not before making one final revelation, when Ubu, the faithful servant of Rage, unmasks and reveals himself as Bane, the man who broke Batman. Now that was a surprise. The last time Bane showed up was in Vengeance of Bane 2 a couple of years back, where he escaped from prison and told Batman to stop chasing him because he was innocent and all that he wanted now was to find his origin. There is literally zero explanation as to how he ends up in Legacy. No, wait. Turns out there is an explanation that was told in a limited series called Batman, Bane of the Demon, which explains just how Bane ended up with Ra's al Ghul and became engaged with Talia against her will. The story shows Bane going up against Rage and earning the title of his successor, explaining what happened to both of them before Legacy started. The problem, however, is that Bane of the Demon was published 2 years after Legacy was over and done. At the time Legacy was published, there was zero clue as to how Bane ended up here, and Legacy never clears up that mystery. So we just have to accept the fact that Bane is here now, as the heroes get ready to follow the trail of Ra's al Ghul as he sets out to spread death across the world. On a very superficial level, the plot of Legacy can be boiled down to a group of heroes that go on a globe-trotting adventure, chasing after an evil mastermind to stop his evil master plan. It is an ultra-generic plot, but on the plus side, at least Batman has to confront two of his most formidable adversaries, Ra's al Ghul, who is powerful and resourceful beyond measure, and Bane, who who is his ultimate physical challenge. I think that this is the strongest asset of the storyline, bringing together the most iconic Batman enemies of the 70s and the 90s for this milestone publication, and they should have leaned more into it, but unfortunately that doesn't happen. In the second chapter of Legacy, Catwoman has to escape from the underground ruins before she drowns inside of them.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
Now you might be thinking, Catwoman is also here? Well, as it turns out, she is, and the reason I didn't mention her before is because she only appears as a small cameo in the first chapter, in the cliffhanger, at the end of the story. Now, unlike Bane, there is an explanation of how she got there. Turns out that in her own comic book, Catwoman was very conveniently hired to infiltrate the exact same underground ruins where Ra's al Ghul was, and of course she ended up as a prisoner of the demon. These Catwoman issues were not part of Legacy, or even the prelude to Legacy, but they should have been, as they explain why Catwoman is here. Unfortunately, the Catwoman chapter that is part of Legacy only works to show her escaping from this prison and moving on with her life. Catwoman does not become part of the story, and I really have to wonder, why is this issue part of Legacy? I mean, the heroes do find out where to go next, but that's about it. It's a filler issue that I think it's only there to extend the length of the crossover and maybe even boost the sales of the Catwoman title. I think it would have worked better as a tie-in instead of the second chapter of the main storyline. The third chapter follows Robin and Nightwing going to France to stop Ra's men from spreading the virus. Robin gets some time in the spotlight, and it's nice to see him meeting some of the old friends he made in Paris back in the first Robin miniseries of 1981. This chapter builds upon the continuity of the Robin mythos, and is also a great showcase of the Nightwing and Robin dynamics, with great characterization on both characters. Chuck Dixon really does give each of them their own voices and personalities, while the art of Stas Johnson is phenomenal. Definitely one of the highlights of the crossover. In the fourth chapter, Batman goes to Scotland, where he gets help from the locals in order to stop Ra's men. This is the first chapter of Legacy that was not written by Chuck Dixon. The story takes place in the Shadow of the Bat comic, which was written by Alan Grant, and I feel like this chapter of Legacy was just an excuse to allow Grant to write a Batman story that takes place in Scotland, which was Grant's home country. The story tries very hard to convince us that Ra's would target such a place to spread the virus, but it just doesn't add up. Paris is a cultural center of the world, with millions of tourists from all over the world going in and out on a daily basis, so it made sense for the Robin chapter of the story to take place there. But Scotland?
The Scottish accent is famous for being difficult to understand.
Well, it's very hard to bring them to mind. This is the thing. It's alright when you're ours and not going and happy as ours. You understand?
Now, initially there were only 3 major places where Ra's would unleash the virus: France, Scotland and Gotham. 2 out of 3 were already safe, but in the last page of chapter 4, they come up with another target, the city of Calcutta in India. So in the 5th chapter, we have to follow Batman to that place to watch him do the exact same thing again. Only this time he is assisted by Lady Shiva, because why not? She literally comes out of nowhere, and after the deed is done, Lady Shiva is gone. This is already past the midpoint of the crossover, and at this point all hope for a great story has vanished. 4 out of 5 chapters have consisted of Batman and his allies traveling to different parts of the world, running after nameless thugs to stop them from releasing a virus that is supposed to be deadly, a virus that most of us have already forgotten about. The only person that has died from the virus so far did so in the prelude to the storyline, and it wasn't even an important character, so we don't really feel invested in the quest of stopping the enemies, because the threat of the virus has already slipped our minds. Sure, they bring it up in dialogue here and there, but when the characters have to speak out loud to communicate information instead of the writers showing us that information, well, that's poor storytelling. They could have used one of those chapters to show us what happens in Gotham and how Huntress deals with all the death and dying from the virus. But instead we have to watch Batman and his allies travel from one place to another doing the same thing over and over again. These chapters have very good writing, with great characterization, and they do elaborate upon profound themes, which is evidence of how good were Alan Grant, Chuck Dixon, and Doug Mahnke as Batman writers. The problem is that even though their individual writing is good, the collective writing that creates the storyline is boring and stale. The main villains of the storyline have quite literally appeared in 1 out of 5 chapters, in the very first one, which means that 1 month of Batman comics went by and nothing important happened. Readers had to wait until chapter 6 of the crossover in Detective Comics issue 701 to have something good finally happening. In this chapter, Batman and his allies are back in Gotham, where they reunite with Huntress and work together to foil the plans of Ra's al Ghul. Each of them are located in different places where Rage could unleash the virus, and after a while it is Batman who is in the right location, a new casino building that is about to open. Batman goes into the casino and, to prevent the virus from spreading, he creates a gigantic explosion that destroys not only the virus, but the entire casino with it. And just like that, the threat of the virus is almost over. Now, the real meat of this issue is the fight between Batman and Bane, because it is their first rematch since Nightfall. This time, Batman is not exhausted and burned out like back then, and Bane is not pumping venom, as he had overcome that addiction. This fight is brutal and very satisfying, with Bane showing his physical strength and almost beating Batman, but the Dark Knight showing his mental strength, which gives him the edge necessary to overcome the Beast and finally defeat him. This match is without a question the greatest moment of the storyline, which is not exactly good, because Legacy was not even supposed to be about Bane. He was just an added bonus to make the story of Ra's al Ghul and the virus more exciting, but suddenly Bane becomes the main villain. And yet when the fight is over, Batman can't even capture Bane because he literally just floats unconsciously away from Gotham. Until 1 year later, when they finally explained what happened to him in a separate graphic novel called Bane, which has no connection or relevance to Legacy. It's almost like DC Comics kept going back to Legacy years after the fact, because they realized how badly they dropped the ball the first time. For example, in the final chapter of the storyline, Robin, Nightwing, and Huntress go after Ra's al Ghul while Batman is fighting Bane. They fight Rage and his troops inside his boat, while Oracle hacks into their system to copy the information from the Wheel of Plagues and creates a cure for the virus. Once she is done with that, the boat blows up in a big explosion in the middle of the water, and Ra's al Ghul and Talia just vanish. Fortunately, there was one more issue to the storyline that works as a prologue, but nope. It doesn't explain what happened to Rage and Talia. Instead, issue number 702 of Detective Comics only shows us the aftermath of Legacy, where Batman and Robin come face to face with the ugly reality about the virus and how it actually killed hundreds of people. It's very sad, and it just works to send both Bruce and Tim on a guilt trip about not being able to save everyone. Until Alfred snaps them out of their misery, which is a very satisfying moment. That and also the long overdue reunion between Commissioner Gordon and his wife Sarah that happens as the GCPD deals with the Ra's al Ghul terrorists that had been captured. So I guess Legacy was all about love? ? And that is the big issue with Legacy. It feels as if the creators didn't really put much thought or care into it. The problem with Legacy is that we never really know what it is all about. It can't really be a Ra's al Ghul story, because the character barely appears in it or does anything important. But that didn't stop DC from advertising Legacy as a Ra's al Ghul story, and in that sense it fails. It's not the worst Ra's al Ghul story, because Bride of the Demon still takes that spot, but it's very close. On the other hand, Legacy is perhaps the worst thing that could have happened to Bane. Just a few years back, Bane was an evil mastermind who was able to create a plan to defeat Batman, something that none of the other villains could ever do, not even Rage. But in Legacy, Bane becomes Ubu, the doormat of Ra's al Ghul who does nothing else except lick his master's boot. Bane fools himself, thinking that he is using Ra's al Ghul, when it's obviously the other way around. So I think that Legacy actually killed any potential that Bane had as a serious enemy. Legacy was clearly just a Detective Comics storyline that was stretched out onto the other Batman comics. I say that because Detective Comics is the only series with the good chapters, while the rest of the books have good writing, but they are mostly boring and repetitive chapters of an otherwise anticlimactic story, where the two main villains just vanish and disappear. Now, not everything was bad. As I said, the art in Detective Comics is phenomenal, and it's also very good to see the Batman family working together as a unit to save the world. The determination of Batman to do everything he can to stop Rage is extraordinary, even if his characterization feels a bit extreme at the end, with all the guilt that he feels about not saving everyone, which takes the tormented side of Batman to another level. And as I said before, the team-up of Bane and Rage was a brilliant touch for the anniversary issue, and it was good to see Ra's al Ghul for the first time in the main Batman comics after 10 years since his last official appearance in Batman 400. Can't really say the same thing about Dahlia though. She was perhaps the most useless character of the storyline, even more so than Catwoman. In the end, Legacy is just another Batman story from the 90s. The fact that it was published as a big crossover in the main line of comics makes it a bit relevant in terms of continuity, but it doesn't really bring any new ideas to the Batman mythos, and the few changes that it creates are mostly negative. The plot was uninteresting, and the ending was a total letdown. But that is just my opinion about Batman Legacy. Feel free to agree or disagree with me down in the comments. Now, as usual, a big thanks to my Patreons for encouraging me to make this video. It wouldn't exist without you guys. In any case, if you want to be part of this awesome group of people who helped me make more videos, then please join my Patreon, so that you can also help me decide what videos I make next. Get your name on these credit lists and get early access to all of my videos. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all, hopefully, in a more positive video about Batman. Until then, stay safe out there.